So as a high school kid, I was making more money than any of my friends doing events on the weekends, but I knew that there would be a cap if I didn't go and challenge myself to learn. And I was deciding between, do I go to film school and pursue the video production, or do I go to business school? I don't want to be the camera operator. I want to be the business owner.
Chris, I am so excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I love what you're doing, and I definitely want to get into the company that you've created and how you're helping entrepreneurs, because I know so many people that are entrepreneurs listen to the show. But I'd love to take back a little bit to talk about your entrepreneur journey and things that you've been through as far as like your company that you created and why you're doing what you're doing now, because I think there's so much value in hearing where people start.
Yeah. So I've always been an entrepreneur from when I was just a little kid, hustling and selling wrapping paper and candy and lemonade and popsicles on the bus and, all those things. My first legitimate company that I paid taxes on was when I was 14. I started a video production company and we did youth sporting events. And so it started just at my high school in Massachusetts, but then we grew really quick to doing events around the state of Massachusetts, throughout New England. I went to college and it was up and down the East Coast. I was hiring my roommates and sticking them in U-Hauls and driving to events and did that all through college. And then after college, set up an office in Boston, set up an office in LA, an office in Ohio, and we had about 300 camera operators that were doing events in all 50 states. So this was, from those little days in my high school gymnasium to the NFL Pro Bowl halftime show and, the Olympics and pre-Olympic coverage for figure skating and synchronized swimming. It was a really cool business.
Wow. So I didn't realize, that you were doing it. I don't know how old you are, so I'm trying to figure out, 14, was that pre-social media?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So did social media come along at what point in that build?
So I was in college when Facebook came, and so it was probably 4, 5, 6 years in that social media exists. So at the beginning, it was like me with VCRs and dials to do the editing. We didn't even have computer editing. We had the over-the-shoulder cameras. We're selling VHS tapes, and so we went all the way from that to video CDs, DVDs, HD DVD, Blu-ray, on demand, live streaming. So tech was always changing.
Wow. So I have so many questions because one, you still went to college. I know so many entrepreneurs they were in the build and then they chose not to. So I'm curious why, but then I'm also curious how you pivoted out of that, because I know that's not what you're doing now. So let's go back to the first question. What made you still go to college when you were finding something that was sticky and that was working?
Yeah, I've always wanted to get better and learn, and I knew that I didn't know everything. And so as a high school kid, I was making more money than any of my friends doing events on the weekends, but I knew that there would be a cap if I didn't go and challenge myself to learn. So I applied to a bunch of schools and I was deciding between, do I go to film school and pursue the video production, or do I go to business school? And I landed on, I don't want to be the camera operator. I want to be the business owner. So I went to business school, and as I was in school, it was the best investment I could make because I would have my professors that are teaching us about accounting and finance and marketing. And on one side of my notebook, I'd take notes. On the other side of my notebook, I'd have business action items. Like, what am I going to do when I get back to my dorm room? And so cool professors just let me use my business as my project for a lot of classes. And it's so accelerated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so cool. So take me through the build into scale, because obviously doing it in high school and even through college locally is one thing. But when you want to start going national, which is what you did, and have different people in all these different cities, what was that build like as opposed to just the gritty beginning of getting there?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it's so easy to do everything yourself. And you think, oh, it's easy. I'll just do this. I'll do that. I can do everything until my 40 hours or 100 hours a week are filled. And so I was the camera operator. I was the editor. I was the sales rep. I was the fulfillment manager. I was doing all of those roles. But then at some point, I have to go to class. And so I remember that the classes started to become important. I had gotten a scholarship. I had to keep my scholarship. And so what I did was I took the train into the city, into Boston, and I started interviewing students at other film schools and said, what do you know how to do? Do you know how to edit? Do you have a camera? Are you a good photographer? Do you do animations? Are you good with music? And I built this directory, this literal 3-ring binder of people that could do different things. And so then when I would get a job, I would farm it out to different students around Boston and know that they would do some of the work while I was doing my homework. And
Amazing.
So it was very early on that I was learning that delegation, and it's addictive. You know, when you find out that you can charge a client, get money, and have someone else do the work, it's addictive, right? You finally have leverage on your time. And so I realized that early on in college, and then I just became obsessed with that. How do I replicate? How do I do 3 events on a weekend? I can only go to 1, but now I've got this way to staff these events that I don't have to be at. And when I saw I could do 3 events in Massachusetts in a weekend, I thought, well, why not Virginia or Florida or anywhere else? And so little by little, it was this kind of experiment for a few years where first I was hiring my roommates, then strangers, then, professional camera operators, and starting to develop process for here's how you do the job, start to finish. And the better my process documentation got, the better the results from these people that I would hire. And so that ultimately would be the bridge into my next business, even though it would be a while before that happened.
Oh my gosh. So first off, like very few entrepreneurs identify that. They think that a new person is going to solve their problem as opposed to a new process. Yeah. So for you to have gone through that and not had to like learn from your mistakes and to be able to identify that with discernment is really amazing. So I just want to acknowledge that. And it's so funny how it does bridge completely into what you're doing now. Did you instinctively see that this is why this process is getting really good? And if I can just help other people build processes, then I can build this whole other business. Like, what was the transition pivot look like?
I wish it was that easy. No. So I ran my video business for 12 years. And as we expanded across the US to the West Coast, we were doing bigger and bigger events. We were hiring bigger crews. And I started to see the people as very interchangeable. I had roles that needed to be accomplished at every event. We had people taking orders. We had sales training and sales roles. We had production managers that would supervise the event. We had editors that were producing these quick edits to hand out flash drives to people as they would leave the event. We had people that would lay the cables and be runners, production assistants, and then we had our camera operators. And so I saw that, doing hundreds of events a year, they're different people often at every venue that are doing these things, but the process and what needs to be done is the same. And so I spent years just dialing in that process to the point, honestly, that I was just getting burnt out of the industry. It felt like I had perfected how to do these like youth sporting events. I had a director of operations. He was interested in a growth path. And so we had a conversation and I said, how about you take over the business? I promoted him to president. I trained him on all the last things that I did in the business. And then I just stepped back. I took myself off salary and I said, I'm just going to be an owner of this company. In that time, around that same time is when I moved to Arizona. So one of the best things I ever did in the company was moving away from the office. When I didn't have an office to go into, I couldn't get into anything. I couldn't be disruptive. I couldn't do any of the work. And so all I was thinking about was, how do I grow this business? Do I make partnerships? Do I invest in new equipment? Do we buy a facility? Those are the things that I was thinking about. But throughout the whole experience, that thread was find people, onboard and train them, have your processes dialed in, and there's really no ceiling on your business growth.
Oh my gosh, it made me think of Rick Steele always says about firing the founder. Like, how fast can you fire yourself from the business? And so it just made me think of that, because there is so many times, I think, founders, they're so close to it. It's so intimate. I've heard entrepreneurs say it's like birthing a baby, which I hear moms saying, no, it is not. But, it's like you're so close and it's so intimate. It's like, how can you remove yourself? There's so much value to be found when you really remove yourself from the business to identify, do you actually have a business or do you just have a job? Because some people think they're building a business, but they don't. They have a job that they have to show up to. And if you do want to go away and move, that business is going to crumble without you. So when you moved, you still had the video production company. What did that transition look like to eventually obviously exit out of that?
Well, that first year was learning to be an owner and learning not to be involved in everything. And I started getting updates, just P&Ls, and having just one-on-one meetings with the president and talking about where the business was going. We didn't have a board, but I was like a one-person board to kind of give some guidance. And then I started popping in from time to time on events. And it was cool because nobody knew me at these events. At the time, we didn't have this, big bio and everything about the start of the company. They were just hired, they're contractors, a lot of them. So I would show up to events and just jump on a camera and see what the other camera operators were saying. And so I was learning things about the business that then I could kind of like undercover boss feed back
that's what made me think of.
the president. Totally.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But then even that, I kind of got past. And so a year later, we ended up selling the company to a competitor that we had that we were always bidding against. And I was able to exit pretty early. I was 26 at the time. And so I needed something else to do. So I was in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And all my friends in EO were like, how did you build this company that people around the country, you're not even there and they're doing the work and you had this exit? And so I started consulting on operations. It was a great way to just figure out what do I want to do next. And I went business to business, industry to industry, and saw that process is industry agnostic. Orientations and roles and responsibilities and people knowing what they're supposed to do in the business is something we all struggle with. Yeah. And founders wanting to get out of the day-to-day and have an asset of a business that they don't have to show up and work to make the paycheck is something we all want. And so I saw this theme repeating over and over, and that's where I got the idea for Trainual, the current business.
Amazing. So you were, consulting for all these other, and you're seeing, okay, here's actually like one of the break points that everybody's struggling with. Yeah. How do I give them a solution?
Right. Yes.
So take us through that.
Yeah. So I was doing this work. I had a small team, 5 of us, that would go business to business, and we would document all their roles and responsibilities and map out all their processes and dial in their handbook, their expectations, their policies. And we were making operations manuals that we could then give them. And we were putting together training videos on YouTube. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, how do I add some intellectual property to a consulting firm so that someday I can sell my consulting firm? And software was an easy idea to pursue. So I downloaded some software. I'd never designed software before, but I downloaded some mock-up software on the internet that I could design an application. I built some really simple pages. Like I want to be able to log in, I want to be able to create different roles in my business, build training, assign it to people, track that they've seen it. It's the perfect thing I would have wanted in the video company. And I made this little prototype and I started giving it away for free to my consulting clients. Did they like it? Did they use it? Was it valuable? And as it became valuable and they started using it, I thought, okay, well, let me charge for this. So now I'll give it away for 6 months and charge after that, $99 a month. Did that for a couple years, and once I had a few $1,000s in just recurring subscription revenue, I'm like paying for my car and my mortgage and thinking, this is great. Like, what can I do with this? So convinced the whole team, let's just give software a shot. Let's stop consulting, no more new clients, and go all in on software. And so that was January of 2018.
2018. Okay. So those people, they stayed on board. Yep. They were all like, okay, let's do it. And then what I love, and we talked off camera right before we started, was I talked to a lot of people that are so focused on cap raise, they want all these investors in their business, which obviously there's a place depending on what you're looking to build and what your scale looks like. But you bootstrapped this in the beginning, right? You weren't bringing outside investors on. You brought this to be profitable. When did you start to kind of see that like this is actually something big? Let's start seeking outside capital and really grow this to the level that it is today.
Yeah, so what really made it scale was understanding our funnel of how we advertise to get one person to sign up for the software. What do they pay on a monthly basis? How long are they going to stick around? How many months does it take to pay back the investment of what it took to buy them? That simple funnel of just your cost of acquiring a customer. It was something that I had dialed in my video business. It was something I dialed into my consulting business, was how many meetings do I have? How many coffees? How many calls? How many books do I need to send out on LinkedIn to get a meeting? I knew what my average consulting engagement was and what my cost to get one of those clients was. And so we were able to repeatably get hundreds of consulting clients. So we did the same thing with the software. If we spend $3,000 on Facebook and we think the average customer is gonna, pay $99 a month, and I feel pretty confident they'll stick around for 6 months, then can I get 5? Can I get 5 people that investment pays off after 6 months? Because after that, it's profit, right? Yeah. So we understood that basic math. And so I had, bootstrapped it from the consulting, the services, and then started spending on Facebook and Instagram. And we went from spending $5,000 a month to $10,000 a month to 20 to 40 to 80 to 100,000 a month on Facebook and Instagram ads. And so I was tapping out every personal resource that I had to fund the growth of this business because it was working.
Yeah.
We were getting customers. We were building millions of dollars in recurring revenue. And at any time, I could pump the brakes on acquisition and just let the money come in. That got investors interested.
And what's great is like it sounds basic, but so many entrepreneurs miss this. Like, what are your basic KPIs? Like, what business metric do you really need? And if anyone listening, if you don't know what yours are or you don't measure them consistently, know what your customer costs, how long are they going to stay with you, so that you know like what's that burn rate, churn rate, like what is that going to be, so that you always know if this is the model by the data, then it's not a perfect world, but most data would support that you can just go do that again anytime that you needed to grow. So you obviously got that, right? You got your marketing down, how to acquire a customer. Has there been any breakpoints in the model or just in this growth path since you wanted to start bringing on outside investments and really make it scale?
Have there been breakpoints? Like, where have we stumbled?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone wants to always know the mistakes, right? Because everyone looks so polished when they come to a podcast or like do a show. So everyone loves to know like what are some of the trip ups that maybe, if I could go back with a magic wand, I wouldn't have done this.
So there were a bunch of trip ups at the beginning. Like, we were still trying to figure out branding and marketing and which messaging would resonate with people. We had this whole campaign about sheep because we thought, the sheep that they cloned, Dolly the sheep, like clone yourself. That was cool messaging. So we had this whole thing about sheep. We had a sheep and a logo. We sponsored this big conference. We're giving out like furry things, and we had sheep. And didn't work at all. And
my gosh.
A lot of crazy ideas like that.
Did it just confuse the market? Like, what are you?
They were like, is this an agricultural farming company? What is this?
I thought of the beds. Counting sheep is what I thought.
Yeah, so clearly you're not thinking about software. But then I would say the first challenge was hiring and learning that we needed to grow the team. We brought in a head of people when we were 15 at our 15th hire. So that was pretty early. And she was working with us as a contractor when we were a team of 8. Okay. And so knowing that I needed help interviewing, hiring, vetting people, I wanted to make sure that we weren't just a revolving door, that we found the perfect fit. And so we were really intentional about that. But it took a couple mishires from me before I eventually sought help for that. So that was a little bit of a rough spot. And then we were really good at getting customers at the beginning. We would entice them to come into the product as if it was magic. And then they'd get in there and be like, this is really hard. I don't know what I'm doing. We had 3,000 customers, 3,000 active subscribers, and 1 support rep to handle, because we honestly weren't giving anybody any support. It was like, you bought it, great. We're going to find more customers.
Next to the first one. Next person.
So that was rough when we saw we had this kind of like leaky bucket of people not succeeding in the product, and then we were constantly focusing on refilling the bucket with new customers. So that was a big effort for us to fix that, and we since have. But all these things are just little iterative, like it's a problem, and now that's the focus for the quarter.
Yeah. How do you ever focus on increasing retention? Is that a consistent focus?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the things that you've done? Because this will apply to anybody, even with membership or any type of recurring. If they, it's one thing you get the customer. The worst thing to do is acquire the customer and then they drop, right? There's no retention because obviously it's the product, it's experience, it's messaging. Like what is it? What have you found that is maybe when the retention wasn't where you wanted it to be, some of the problems and some of those solutions? Because I hear this come up all the time.
Yeah, so retention it starts pre-sale. Are you finding the right customers? Are you advertising in the right places? Are you bringing the people that have a long-term problem to you? Or is it a transient customer that's going to leave right away? So really understanding the customer is important, and fixing it up funnel in your sales process and your marketing process. Then once you bring them on, we've invested a ton in implementation, in making sure that someone's first 30 or 60 days are incredible. And so we have all these metrics that we're tracking in our product to make sure that they hit those check boxes. And we have people that are now assigned to get you to those goals, but we also have triggers in our messaging that automatically email you when you haven't done certain things. And so understanding where that customer is in their adoption of your product or service is really important, because if you can get someone successful early on, chances are they'll stay successful. Whereas if they just want to be successful and they keep paying and they think they're going to go to the gym and they keep not going, they're like just waiting to churn. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, because that's the beauty and the curse of software. Yeah. It's like any type of SaaS company. It's like that's why they're getting the multiples on EBITDA right now. It's like one of the only things still that's kind of left that you can get high returns on an exit, because if you can get them to stick, but it's if you can get them to stick.
Right.
And it's like if you can get them within those first 30 days to actually use it. Nobody wants to take data out if they're using it and they're working on it. So is that
sticky.
Yeah, exactly. Is that like a 30, 60-day process that you found?
Yeah. So we have metrics for the first 30 days that we want them to hit. And then beyond that, we're looking at utilization, like how often are they logging in? Are they using the product? Is there a big month over month change? And we have a different role in the company, a customer success manager that's focused on, several hundred accounts that they're watching behavior. Do I need to reach out to this person to re-engage them, figure out what's going on in their business? And so there's all these different roles from, marketing and sales, implementation, customer success, support, to answer questions if you need it. All of these things, you could adapt to whatever industry, but it's like, do we have the right customer? Did we get them to initial success? Are we keeping them successful and managing that relationship? And then I think the last piece that involves retention is a lot of people think about customer retention, but the real metric you want to look at is revenue retention. Of all of the customers that you retain are the ones that stick around spending more than the initial batch you brought in. That's a really important metric. And so I'll just adapt this to, let's say it's an agency or something. Let's say you get 5 customers in 1 month and you put them each on a $5,000 or $10,000 retainer. Let's say $10,000 for simplicity. So now you've got $50,000 of recurring revenue. Your agency's kicking butt and you brought that in. 6 months later, if one of your customers drops, but the other one grew to $20,000 a month, you're actually ahead of where you were when you started. And so it's a different way to look at retention, but that dollar retention actually tells you that of the bag of, the customers you brought in, is the overall value of those customers growing in the cohort, and that's important.
That's great. I like the difference there. Have you found outside of, you said Facebook ads, Instagram ads, what else have you found where your target audience lives?
Oh, yeah. We do a lot of event sponsorships now. We do podcast sponsorships. We started putting out a lot of our own organic content. So you spoke at our event,
yes.
Playbook. We have 5,000 or so people attend and watch those videos. We've got an affiliate program. We've got partners that we work with and manage. And then one thing we built up is a network of consultants, of people that are helping businesses with their operations, but don't have the tech tools that we have. And so we found over 1,000 consultants we call it process people, around the world that we've just kind of unified and built this community out of. And they become really big advocates for the software because we're doing monthly coaching calls and helping them totally for free with their business.
Oh, wow. So it's like you developed your own raving fans, your own little cult-like customers that can support. And that's great too, because you're not only just going out to the public, but you're also trying to find like the operators, if you will, that are also that can utilize your software with their clients and give them a better experience.
Right. Yeah. So, if I was giving advice to someone, I think start wide. You want to figure out who you like working with, who gets the most value out of your product, what, engagements go the best, which customers stick around the longest. And so we did that. We were just kind of like a wide spray at the beginning. But then we did a lot of data analysis to say which industries are best, which company sizes are best, which lead sources are best. And then little by little, you dial in, here's where I should get more customers. I'm going to invest more here.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about, like, I've heard some, I don't know if this is my quote, so I'm going to preface that, but I've heard people say this before, that oftentimes you think that a person is going to be the savior of your business, that maybe you didn't hire the right person, you just need to hire another person, but it's really typically a lack of process. How does Trainual bridge that gap for entrepreneurs of creating, like, obviously it's a process, but what do you have in there? Because I think people will be floored once they actually look inside of all of the ways that you can help. So if you can maybe just give us a little bit behind the curtain.
Yeah, sure. So the way I talk about all the knowledge in your business is kind of a playbook for your business. And I think there's 4 pieces of information in every single business. There's the general profile of your business, which is like, what industry do you play in? Who's your target customer? What's your mission, your vision, your values, your background story, the key milestones, like all that is your profile of your company. Then every business has a unique set of people with different backgrounds and bios and reporting structures and roles and responsibilities. Every business has a set of policies or rules that maybe we have to abide by because of the government, or maybe we make up ourselves because they're just kind of norms. And then every business has processes, best practices, how-tos. And so it's all of that material that someone needs to learn when they join your business. And so when you think about onboarding a new person, you kind of onboard them in that order. You say, here's who we are and what we're all about. Here's your coworkers and your team and what they do. Here's the rules of how to be successful here. And here's the best practices that we've come up with that you can use until you create your own, because we want to keep up leveling the business.
And you have so many templates in there that people can start with and adapt, correct?
Oh yeah, hundreds and hundreds of templates and an AI generator to build your own. So, it's really about documenting how your business works. If someone else was going to step into your business and run it, if you had to hand the keys over to someone else, how does everything work? Who is everybody? What are they expected to do? And what are all the best practices? And so process is the largest component, because that's how we do what we do. That's where everyone wants to start. I think it's the first 3 that build this foundation of knowledge, because in the absence of an explicit process, you can directionally get it right by what you expect of someone, what your rules of the workplace is, what your core values are in the business. And if you give everybody that foundation, you've got great people that are going to stick around, and then they can lean on the processes to do things as well as you have, at least as well as you have, hopefully better.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I was just on a board meeting this morning, and, there's this thing that happens in nonprofit as well, where you have like someone that's a CEO or the executive director, and they have all this knowledge, and then they leave. And it's like the team, when you replace that person, most companies you have the lower or middle entry people that you have a little bit of turnover that you want the processes for. But I think it applies the other way around too, where it's like, rather than that person at the top taking that information or trying to train anyone, to have all of that somewhere in one place, easy, accessible, that everyone knows where to find it. I think there's a lot of less missed business opportunity in the transition.
Oh yeah. I'll ask you this question, and I'm almost afraid to ask it because I know you're a real estate mogul, but if I wanted to build wealth over time, would I rent or buy?
Build wealth over time, you would buy.
Okay. So we all understand that concept that you want to buy into real estate because you build wealth. You're getting equity, right? Yes. What's the other big payment we put out every month that's not rent or mortgage? It's payroll. Mm-hmm. And so as we're spending that money every single month, are we retaining the knowledge that everybody's getting by working in our business? The experience, the knowledge, are we documenting it? Are we capturing it? Do we own it? Or does that knowledge walk out the door like rent? Are we renting salaries, or do we have something to show for them?
That's a great way. That's a great analogy. It's a great way to put it. I actually was on the BBC talking about this. We were talking about when, tech has obviously cut thousands and thousands of jobs. And so we were talking about this, and I said, you know what? I think a lot of times you see it on a balance sheet because it is such a high expense. You see it on a P&L, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got all this payroll. So it's the first area to kind of look to cut, especially because of some of the things that were going on in the world with PPP and ERC. But I was like, what I think that there's an opportunity cost. There's a cost that is not measured on your P&L, and that's the knowledge and the experience of the people that have been in your company. And when they go to leave, like that deficit, you can't measure. And so I love that you said that. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, because obviously you're in tech. How did you navigate through some of this uncertainty that we've just seen with Silicon Valley Bank and all these other companies, reducing their workforce? Did you guys have to make cuts? What does that look like?
We've never made cuts. We've never done layoffs, fortunately, knock on wood. But, I grew up as a bootstrapped entrepreneur. This is 19 years or something of raising money, of running a business. And so I didn't know how to waste money.
Yeah.
I never had that luxury. And so we always made sure we're not overhiring, we're not overspending. We always ran the business so that any money that we were burning on sales and marketing was for growth. And if at any time we wanted to just shut that spigot off or slow down our growth to be just organic, we could be profitable. And it's a powerful position to be in because as there's uncertainty in the market, you can control your destiny. You don't have to worry about that you're going to run out of cash because we can stretch the cash that we have in the bank to last us forever. And so because that's how we always ran the business, fortunately, we've never had to do layoffs and we've never had to make, dramatic decisions that some companies have.
Oh, I love that. And I think that there is such value in having to do it on your own. Like I see people that raise money and they don't even have a product or they don't have anything and they're just trying to do it because that's for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason all of a sudden it became like sexy and glamorous to like raise capital.
Yeah, it gets all the headlines.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Like I see people sharing so-and-so raise this, raise this. Like, where's the product? What's the company doing? What's the revenue? Like, what's the customer experience? Like, do you have cult-like customers or what's going on? And so I love that you did it because I think it gives you a perception that when you do raise a bunch of capital, there's something about it. Like I always say, no one's going to care about your money more than you. Yeah. And so even when you have outside investment, it's almost like you can't quantify it in the same way of taking it out of your pocket. Right. Now, you obviously got processes down before you started to raise outside capital and starting to get investors. I know we have a friend in common, Damon, who's one of your investors. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about what that process was like and when did you start to see you had traction in order to start to have those conversations?
Yeah, so I never knew that I wanted to raise money because, again, I hadn't experienced that and it felt scary. And I heard all these stories about, investors come in and take over control and the business blows up. And so I was afraid of raising money. We got to where we were a few million in revenue and in recurring revenue. And I started putting out press releases. Every time we added another million in revenue, I put out a press release. I wasn't worried about sharing our numbers, but what it did was it created all this inbound interest from investors. So I started getting people knocking on our door and saying, your business sounds really exciting. I'd love to talk to you. Instead of me having to cold pitch investors or go to angel groups or anything like that, I had people coming to me. And so then what I did was I condensed the process down into a week. I had 40 slots on the calendar. And I said, if you're interested, I'll give you a deep dive on the business. We'll get to know each other. And you tell me if you think I should raise money now, or maybe we should talk next year. And so I went through that process and I had, 8 or 9 people that said, yeah, I would write you a check right now. Let's do this. And so my two favorites from that group, I penciled out the terms that I would like and sent it to both of them. Turns out they knew each other and they decided to just go in on the deal together. And we closed the round in like 5 weeks. And so it was a really streamlined process because I think a lot of entrepreneurs can waste a whole year, 2 years trying to raise money, and it takes your focus off growing the business and your customer. And I didn't want that at all. And so for me, it was let me just cast a line and see if there's any interest. And if I can't do this really quick, then I don't want to do it this year.
So you didn't put together a big fancy deck before you jumped on the calls with them?
I had a deck, but it was I wouldn't say it's fancy. I made it. Yeah.
Yeah, you made it. I love that. And so 40 calls. Did you book all 40 calls?
It was like 36.
36 calls. Yeah. And those press releases, where were you putting them out on LinkedIn? Did you work with a PR company?
No, I think it was PR Web. You can pay like $100 or $200 and get a press release out. So yeah,
I love it. I love the gritty stories. I know everyone likes to talk about all the fancy, but I think the mindset of the founder is what's the most unique thing. It's like if we can break into the mind, then we can duplicate the result, because it's like the way somebody views a problem and how they source to find a solution is everything. Because a lot of people, as we know, see the problem and then they just see the problem. It's like they can't get out of the weeds or the swamp of where they are. So I love that you're like, yes, I want to do this, but you had discernment to know that if I spend too much time raising capital, I'm actually going to take away from my business. Yeah. And I think people don't realize that every single decision you make can cost you because of that distracted focus. And spending a year to acquire capital and investors would have actually put you backwards.
That becomes the job. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's not what I wanted.
You have a book, right?
Yeah.
You talk about that. How has the book helped with lead gen, or is this just something that you do and give to people? Tell me a little bit about the book.
Yeah, the book has been our cheapest acquisition source.
Okay.
Which, we're trying to figure out how to really blow that up. But coming out with the book, it was just after having, tens of thousands of customers go on to Trainual, what are all of the lessons? What are the most common things people are documenting? Where do you start? Who helps you get this done? How does it not get out of date in the business? I wanted to just put that all together in one book. So it's called the Business Playbook. It's the whole framework about how to do this, how to, document what you do and delegate what you do so that you can focus on what you love, do anything. So the book was great. We did it as not a self-published thing, but with like the help of a publisher that works with you. We put it out and we started advertising it on Amazon. We got some partners to promote it. We sold thousands and thousands of copies of the book, and then when people pick the book when they sign up, we can see what we spent in ad costs pushing the book out versus what they end up buying, and it's been an incredible lead source for us.
So it's performing better than just a straight ad to cold audience?
Oh yeah,
and what do you do, like free book plus shipping or something? Really, 50 times better? That's amazing.
Yeah, it's way cheaper. And so what we're looking into now and testing currently is, can we do an outbound where we just send them to ideal customers?
Wow.
And see how that converts.
And just skip the ad to it altogether.
Yeah.
Wow. So are you doing free book plus shipping? Is that the funnel?
No, they're paying for the book.
They're paying for the book.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's Tony, like one of Tony and Dean's big model is book free plus shipping.
Yeah.
I think Brendan.
Russell Brunson.
Yeah,
did
Russell.
That too.
I think they all started it from Brendan. I think he might have been because he's so good with the analytics. Yeah, Brendan Burchard.
Yeah.
He's so good with the numbers and analytics, and he's way ahead of he's always been way ahead of his time with all of that.
Yeah.
But that could actually work really, really well too. Like
Yeah,
I love
I'll
that
have to
to
try
just
that.
get it out. It's like how do you find 1,000 more of those consultants, and maybe that's the lead gen for all of them.
Right.
So,
yeah. And so anytime I'm speaking, we're filling the room with books. I'm sure you do the same. It's a great something to have on people's desks that they look at and say, oh, that's right, I want to do that. It's a great tangible thing. And it actually in some way kind of represents the idea of having a playbook in your business. It's a tangible representation of the asset that you own. So many of us have our businesses just stuck up in our brains. And if we can actually extract all of that from us, from our team members, and get it into a place that you could share with an investor, you could hand over to a new owner, you can show to a new employee, imagine how much more streamlined your business is.
Oh, and just the return that you can get if you do decide to exit or sell at some point. Because I feel a lot of people in the beginning, they don't do the work to actually make their business an asset that's scalable and sellable at the end.
Yeah.
It's something that's so important. And if you have, that's one thing buyers are going to want. They want to know, like, operationally, like, what's it look like? Efficiency. If you step out as the founder, do I actually have something that I can just step into and run, or am I stepping into a job?
Right.
And to have all of that written down, I think is so invaluable for founders to do sooner and not later.
Yeah, I remember. So I was telling you when we walked in here, my first office was like 20
it's right
steps
down here,
down the hallway, which
Yeah.
is so crazy. And we were sharing the office with this agency that was in there because I couldn't even afford the whole thing by myself. And the agency owner, he was brand new into the business. And what he told me is, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what my business is supposed to have.
Right.
And that checklist, that mental checklist of, have I done roles and responsibilities? Do I have an org chart? Do my people have some kind of growth plan? Do I have a handbook? Do I have SOPs or policy? These are things that we over time might hear or read about or see at a conference. And little by little, your business gets a little bit more mature, a little bit more stable. And so having a product like ours is really about solidifying your business, making it more mature so that everything is described for anyone that has questions. And it's, in the same way that when you first get started, you get a business card because it feels cool to hand out, or you get a website or a t-shirt, you're like, my business is real.
Yeah, right.
Having like that playbook that guides your whole business is like the pinnacle of that.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, because I see people are like, well, how much time should I spend training a staff? In the beginning when you're doing it all yourself, training some staff, or I feel like I've repeated myself over and over again. And I think it was Rory Vaden. I don't know if it's his, but I think he was the one that originally mentioned this, that there's a 30X rule. Like anything that takes you as the entrepreneur or the founder 5 minutes to do, and you have to do it over and over and over and over again. People don't realize that 5 minutes over a year, what's that going to add up to? So even if it takes you 2 hours, 4 hours, a month to get all of this into the software, the amount of time, oh my gosh, like you can't even measure what it's going to save you.
Right.
I can't even, I wish that I was using Excel spreadsheets like back in the late 90s when I started, and that is a lot to put in, but you've made it so simple, and I love what you're doing for entrepreneurs and founders. And so I just think anyone listening needs to do a demo. Talk. By the way, I love Joe. He
Joe's
is
amazing.
like the best.
Yeah.
And so we were super excited to work with Joe, and I'm just like, the people on your team too. Like I can tell that it's not just about getting somebody in there. It's like you want the right person, and
Totally.
every single person from Becky, they've all been absolutely wonderful.
Oh,
So
thank you.
If
Thank
Joe's
you.
listening, I want him to know I'm his number one fan.
Joe's running like a 100-mile race this weekend.
Oh my gosh, is he seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. 100
Yeah.
miles? Wow. So please tell everyone, where can they get the book? How can they find out more if they want to find out more about the software and actually start using that in their business as well? What's the best step?
Yeah, so you can just go to businessplaybook.com, and that's where the book is. It'll teach you all about, you can read a little excerpt, you can download a piece and see where to buy it and what stores to buy it. Otherwise, just go to trainual.com. It's like a training manual, trainual.com. Tons of free templates and resources, things you can download. We have a whole editorial with blog posts. We've got thousands of YouTube videos and podcast episodes that we've shot. We just want to be the most helpful when it comes to understanding how to document what's in your business, how to get that knowledge out of your people, whether you do it on spreadsheets or Google Docs or use a tool like ours. So come check us out.
Awesome. Well, I use your software now. We don't do Google. We don't have the docs anymore, but we'll link all of that up in the show notes for everyone so that you can find it. Thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate you spending the time pouring into our audience. It was good seeing you.
You too. Thanks, Candy.
Thanks.